concerned about it. And we've talked to everybody about the concerns, so we're here to discuss that today and try to come up with a solution of what we can do, what we want to do, and maybe do something a little different or not. So we just need to nip it in the bud and be done with it, so that's why we're here today. So I guess the first thing I need to start with is there's conversation. I'll just go ahead and let you know now. I'm not concerned with phase 1 or 2. That's already done with. There's no reason to hold that up no further than what we already have. This is not no reason. This is about phase 3 and going.
I think it's phase 2, section.
Phase 2, section 3. Is that it?
Phase 2, section
2B, yeah.
2B.
Yeah.
So that's what we're here for. So it's open for discussions. I guess the first person I want to be spoke for, I guess, is explain to us a little bit is engineer right over there writing down, documenting everything. He must got our email. So I'm gonna let you talk to us a little bit. You know what our concerns are, right?
I think so, yeah. We've been out there with, good Lord, about half the population of Chapel Hill, it felt like.
The main concerns we have is not as much as the tanks, and we know we're not gonna, maybe not put tanks, maybe put tanks, put choppers, not put choppers, leave it free flowing, but then upgrade our tanks and our pumping system with some chopper pumps, better pumps to pump it.
Correct.
Because we're not convinced how long it's gonna take us to build a facility that it's gotta have solids. But we do know it's going to happen, it's gotta happen.
It does.
And so I guess we will see if you've done anything different since we've talked to you last, and what you've come up with, and what's your thoughts on at least upgrading the pumps to handle it at a pumping station.
Yeah, well, I'll start kind of at the beginning.
I appreciate that.
So, as everybody knows, initially, this town was built with septic tank effluent systems. And one of the reasons it was built that way was twofold. One, it was a little less expensive to install, and the city got an additional 10% grant from EPA called Innovative Alternative Technology Grant to do it that way, to build it that way. The unfortunate thing about most of the Innovative Alternative Technology grants is they didn't work very well. And in most cases, those systems are either have been or are being replaced. Chapel Hill originally was a small community. I mean, you had, what, 400, Chad, is that about right? 400 customers, sewer customers? Before the onslaught of development.
Tommy, it wasn't that many, maybe probably 300.
All right, so less than 400. Well, that type of system really doesn't do anything but hurt. I mean, you're going into a sewer lagoon, and your discharge criteria were, at least initially, what the state allowed you to put into the river wasn't too stringent. Of course, over time, as everybody knows, the federal regulations and the state regulations get tighter and tighter and tighter and become more difficult to comply with. And then what's happened here is you've had a significant amount of development where now you have probably more proposed homes and proposed sewer customers than you had, just even to start with. So you basically doubling the number of systems that you have. You hired a firm to come in and design a treatment facility for you that would meet, hopefully, your long-term needs. It's a type of plant that can treat your current waste and accommodate the proposed development that you have right now, but also can be expanded in the future if and when development continues to go. The problem is, as Mayor, as you said, y'all have heard that engineers stand up and say, this system won't work with septic tank effluent waste. It's got to have straight out waste, coming out of the home. It's called it has to have biomass in order for that system that he's designing to work. So when we first came on board, and when Amanda asked us to take a look at this, and we understood what the situation, what the issue was, and there were several subdivisions that were proposed for the development. Ellington, Grove, River Forest, and Lord, I don't know how many versions of Spring Creek Farms there is, but and again, there's been multiple engineers that have submitted multiple drawings on that. But at any rate, what we did was immediately had meetings with the various developers and asked them to no longer propose putting in septic tanks and having septic tank effluent lines, but instead going with one of two things: either conventional gravity sewer, what almost everybody in this state, and for that matter country, uses, or in some situations where the gravity system may not work for certain applications, that instead of using septic tank effluent systems, either pump or gravity, that we use grinder pumps. And there have been a few applications where we've had, one application in particular, where we've had to do that. So, and so that everybody understands, and I was telling this to Isaac when we met, I don't get, was it last week or week before last? I just remember it was cold. These pump stations that this waste is going into, these pumps that are in there have impellers, and they basically suck the waste in and they spin it around and they pump it out into a force main. Well, these pumps, the impellers are made out of metal, either bronzed or cast iron, coated cast iron, and they have vanes in them, and they're inside a metal casing, and they're turning at 1,800 rotations per minute. That's faster than you can blink. So, and that's what I told Isaac, what would happen if you stuck your hand up in that pump when it's turning metal on metal at 1,800 rotations per minute? Would tear it to shreds. And that's what it does to the waste that comes into it. It basically tears it to shreds. And there are various, I mean, in town right now, you've got a few lift stations. There are communities that we work in. We're doing some work in Clarksville, Tennessee. They've got 212 sewer lift stations. The little small town of Selmer, Tennessee has 42 lift stations. So it's not unusual to have a number of lift stations in your city. If given the situation that you've got, most people, unless the designed capacity for the sewer lift station is 1 million gallons a day or more, rarely do people put grinders on front of it. Usually if it's 1 million gallons a day or more, you're in an urban area and you're collecting waste from commercial, industrial, residential, and whatever else there is. And sometimes it's a little more difficult to control what you get into the system. Here you've got a small amount of commercial and a lot of residential. And the pumps that you have in your system should accommodate that kind of flow and not air up because you're putting solid. Again, we work for somewhere between 65 and 75 utilities, and every sewer system, or just about every sewer system, has sewer lift stations very, very similar to the type of sewer lift stations that you have here in town. Now, if this town is concerned that things that come into your system may stop these pumps up, it happens occasionally. I will give you the biggest example of when that occurs is if you have a healthcare facility or a nursing home. I call it nursing homes, I guess, assisted living, whatever. they use those, quote, flushable wipes. There's no such thing as a flushable wipe. I'll just tell you, that tears up a sewer system about as bad as anything. And those things obviously will, if you do them in great quantities, what happens is when you flush them, they'll go a certain distance and they'll stay in the line for a while. And over time, you'll get more and more and more of those that accumulate in the line and it'll take here you've got inflow and infiltration, rainwater and groundwater that gets into your system, which when it gets into the system, it surcharges everything and it pushes all that stuff out. And if you had those types of things and that got to the lift station in one big clump, I'll give you an example in Adamsville, Tennessee. They've got 2 sewer lift stations in town, actually 3. And we've replaced all of them, but one of them was the primary lift station that takes 90% of the flow from our old town, and there's an assisted living facility really close to where this lift station is. And every time they have a problem with that one main pump station, it's because they got those flushable wipes from that assisted living facility. You could go to the assisted living facility, there's a manhole right in the street where they tied into. You lift the cover off and look in there, and it sure as the world, it was full of those things. So if you have concerns that something like that might occur, there are pumps that have what are called grinder impellers, okay? And you can do 2 different things. For anything that comes into your system new or proposed, like for example, the Grove over here is proposing to build a new sewer lift station to pump all the way back to the wastewater plant. Well, if you have that concern, then what we can do is tell them, we want you to specify, or we're going to specify a pump with a grinder that has the grinder built into it. That's really, from my perspective, that's belt and suspenders. But if you've got that concern, we can certainly do that. The other thing we can do is ultimately retrofit. We're probably going to have to retrofit most of the lift stations anyway. At some point, when we do retrofit those existing lift stations that you've got, we can also include that grinder impeller in the replacement of the pumps in those lift stations. And if that gives y'all additional comfort, and obviously you got people here that have to deal with that on a regular basis, and if it gives them that comfort too, there's nothing wrong with that. The other element of that is probably a lot of the new lift stations that you're going to have in this town are going to be developer driven. Sorry guys, but the developer generally will absorb the cost associated with putting those types of impellers in as opposed to just conventional ones.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay. Any questions about any of that?
Isaac?
Yeah, a couple of questions on the transition period between the aerated lagoon, which is what we have now, versus the, is it an ATS system coming in? Or
It's
what?
actually, they call it SBR, sequential batch reactor.
Okay, so the new reactor system coming in the transition period, what do y'all have total in Spring Creek Farms, including condos, 250 front doors
Yes.
and 130, 140 counting the townhomes?
100 single families, 43 townhomes.
So 143, 250, so roughly 400 rooftops potentially will all be, well, minus phase 1 out there, so let's say 350 rooftops taking Blackwater to the lagoons. What is the town's action plan, 1, for the transmission lines between the lift stations and the lagoon, if we have any bottlenecks or dips or, and I think we spoke about this briefly week before last. Does the town need to set aside some money to put in some manholes, put in some clean out ports, dig some lines up as we have failures, because we will. And then two, I've talked to a couple of guys with the state, one local guy, Gary Horn, you probably know Gary. I talked to Wade Murphy, who's actually
I know
reviewing.
Wade.
Yeah, he's reviewing y'all's permit right now, so he's.
Waste director, the permit
Yeah,
section for.
yeah, so I spoke with Wade
Clean water.
for about an hour on the phone today. I know Wade from prior dealings at Chapel Woods up here. It's a great water system.
You don't have to try real hard to talk to Wade. for an hour.
Wade will talk your ear off. So, but I talked to Wade, and his one comment that he made to me made more sense than anything that I've heard. If we're allowing these developers to put black water into our system, if the infrastructure will support it, may need some grinder pumps, whatever. This town has to be 110% committed that that new sewer plant is going to be built. Because the point he brought up, our current permit, John, you know all about this, Tommy knows a lot about this. You know, your DO levels and your BOD levels, there are certain criteria on the permit we have to meet with clean water going to the river. Accepting these solids to the lagoons could disrupt that, and these guys are gonna have some challenges to keep that under control. So I think the biggest thing that I wanna hear is that irregardless of how many houses get built, this new wastewater system has to be built, and it has to be built in a timely fashion. Was dealing with the state, what's that, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years maybe?
Yes, yeah, that's a long process.
When the process is approved, irregardless of how much money we've got socked away from the $5,000 capacity fees, the town has to build this system, because taking black water to the lagoons can work temporarily. It's gonna drive these guys absolutely crazy. It can work temporarily, but it cannot be something, if the economy disrupts and houses are no longer getting built in 2 or 3 years, we have to build the system, period. It's,
I will say, if it gives you some comfort, most of West Tennessee
Mhm.
has aerated lagoons as their treatment process. And they range in some, we're working on one right now that's 1,445,000 gallons a day. And we're in the process of applying for funding for another one that's 2 million gallons a day. So they do work, and they have worked for 100 years. It's just a function of how much air,
Yeah.
how much detention time you have, and how much air you're able to put into it.
So I guess the growing pains between what we have now and the new system being built, if we get a violation or we put something in the river that ain't supposed to go to the river, are there temporary Band-Aids that we can put on the lagoon system without cutting off the black water? Because that's not an option. I mean, what's approved now is approved, but moving forward, if we get into Knox's subdivision over here and other stuff coming up over on Spring Creek Street, I guess, the other subdivision, I mean, once we start accepting this black water, we have to know this new system is gonna work. And to the best of my knowledge, we probably have an idea of what the system's gonna cost, but don't know for sure. I mean,
I think he said at the last time he was here, he thought between $5 and $6 million.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess the assurance I need, because I have nothing at all to do with the moment, other than when we need to have a work session like this, the town is gonna have to build this new sewer system if we're gonna give these guys permission to take black water to the sewer system, in my opinion. And that's pretty much what Wade told me. He said, he agreed, the new system coming on board, he's actually reviewed the permit or the applications that have been submitted so far. He's actually looked over it all, and he said the new system coming on board has to have the black water to work. And you told me the same thing the other day, and Wade just backed it up. But not building it does not seem like it's gonna be an option. So that's, I guess, would be my.
Does anybody know what stage? I know what stage we're in, but what's holding us up from saying it won't be built? What could happen?
Money.
Money.
It's just as simple as that, money.
Money and people coming in.
Yeah,
The economy.
The economy.
yeah, the economy and money.
Yeah, we hit a recession.
We're screwed.
You won't see these guys for a while.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question? Is that part of this?
Yes, sir.
So you're asking the question, if I'm understanding this correctly, you're asking the question as to whether or not, are we committed to building the?
No,
No.
not, yeah,
No.
well,
No,
the city.
that's what I mean. We as a city, yeah.
We
Are you committed to
say
building?
we are, but we don't have $5 million in the bank.
No, I understand that, but I understand that, but if I'm not mistaken, I mean, the board voted a year and a half, 2 years ago to do this system, so that decision's already been made, I thought.
I mean, you can't do it without money.
I'm not disputing that, I guess but it sounds to me as though you're
You have to have
asking.
permits and you have to have money. So,
Sure, absolutely,
We
but
haven't got that far
that
yet.
was voted on, are we doing a new sewer system 2 years ago?
Tommy, one of the things that's a concern is, the money part obviously is an issue.
Absolutely,
There are a couple of things that are happening right now and will happen probably later this year. The American Rescue Plan Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law
sure.
that's pumping hundreds of millions of dollars into the state of Tennessee specifically to help with these types of issues. And we talked about that a little bit at these meetings. And one of the things that this board is hopefully being proactive about is trying to get access to as much of those that's a grant program. There's one component of it, if you go to the state, there's money that the state has set aside. Every city got an allocation. They could use it how they want to. It's recommended that they use it for water and wastewater and or broadband, but most cities are using it for water and wastewater. Every county got an allocation. Until mid-January, second week of January, many of the counties were trying to figure out how to distribute it out to local utilities. But then the U.S. Treasury Department got involved and said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to let you apply this to your general fund. And not only will we let you apply it to your general fund, but we're willing to give this as a lump sum to you. And you got these provisions. I mean, you have to follow these guidelines, and you can only use it for these things. But we'll let you use it for that. Well, every county wants to buy new police cars and build new EMA buildings and add an emergency room or some kind of health clinic or things like that rails one of this program. So they immediately reversed course, and instead of figuring out how to distribute it out to local utilities, they backed up and said, you know what, we're going to keep this, we're going to use it ourselves, and we're going to make these capital improvements and not have to raise taxes. So I said, cities got their allocation, the counties got their allocation, and then the state of Tennessee got their allocation. They're spending $81 million on administration and other operational expenses associated with the administration of this fund. They're spending $269 million on special projects, which I kind of strongly suspect has a lot to do with Blue Oval, because they still got about $120 million worth of infrastructure to build out there to support that. And then the other $1 billion, they've distributed out to each county and all 95 counties and 267 of the 365 cities in the state. The cities that didn't get an allocation don't have water and sewer systems. That money that the state is administering, that $1 billion, Chapel Hill has an amount set aside for them, but Marshall County also has an amount set aside for them, and those funds have to be used for water and sewer. Y'all want to know how much is in each? Do y'all know already how much is in each one? Do you want to know how much is in each one?
Yeah.
Marshall County, the state of Tennessee has allocated in their program for Marshall County's access $3,375,564.93. Now, I will guarantee you that there's a match requirement to that. That's what grant money there is for you, but there's a 40%, I'm sorry, they changed it last week. It's now 35% match. So in other words, that number, 3,375,564.93 is 65% of some number. Whatever that number is, somebody do the math, figure it out. Probably close to $5 million, let's say. That's the amount that you would have to spend in order to get that full amount, that full $3,375,000. So that's set aside for the county. My guess is, Tommy and his board chairman, they've probably been wearing the county mayor out, trying to get access to everything that they would give them under that program. Am I wrong? No. So, and I've already told y'all, we've been to 2 meetings, I've told you 2 different times, we need to get in front of that county mayor and petition them to be able to use this eligibility to apply for funds. And you gotta apply for these funds. It's called a non-competitive grant, but you can apply for them. There's a series of things that you have to go through to do the application, but you can apply for that money and get access to it, okay? So that's the amount of money that the state has in their pot for Marshall County. Now, in addition to that, the state also has money set aside for Chapel Hill. And there is another $669,173 that's set aside for Chapel Hill. So you've got to put a 35% match up for that. So basically, if you do $1 million or $1.1 million project, you would get the full $669,173. Everybody with me? That's great. So there's money out there, guys, and this is round 1. This is the American Rescue Plan Act. The other part of this that you need to know is that the money that you're getting directly, you can use as your match.
Here's the only problem I have with all this, is it all sounds great, but we're talking about time down the road, later down the road. I don't have a lot of time tonight, and I gotta solve what we're gonna do with phase, 2B. And the grants and all that is great, we're gonna do that, and we get all that, but I gotta decide tonight and next week, coming up, this board, both of my boards, we gotta decide whether we're gonna do something with 2B, put pumps in them, not put pumps in them, or upgrade our system. We gotta come up with a solution, because these guys are not gonna sit back another month. So I gotta come up with solutions tonight. So, we know where you stand, we understand where you stand, we know where they stand, I know what you're gonna say and stand, but that's not where, as right now, the town of Chapel Hill stands. I don't know where we stand at, and that's what the board's gonna have to decide. And I got some members over here I'm gonna have to talk, because we're gonna run out of time, of what their opinion is. So, Tommy, we're gonna start with you. I know you're gonna have some things to say.
Well, I think Alton and I sort of got a little turn here. We agree to disagree a little bit on the pump station, the lift station down there. I do have concerns about impellers, and I have seen what he designed for my fixing. I have been back in these lift stations after the wipes, after the diapers, after the feminine napkins and everything else that gets flushed. That winds up down and winds up wrapping up around the impellers over time and then stopping it. You know, it may not be an instant thing, as he alluded to, you know, but over time, it's not when, but it's not if, it is when. You know, it's going to be an issue. You know, so that's one of my major concerns for the town of Chapel Hill. You know, so.
Right now, the past week or two, has everything been going pretty good as far as your license going out to inspecting? That's going good for you?
As far as I know,
And that's a lot better on both sides, I'm assuming it's getting checked? And same for you, I guess?
Yes, sir.
Chad, you got anything to talk about? Got any opinions?
No, I just, you know, every issue that Tommy brought up, I brought up, it's just so we go in this thing eyes wide open. You know, I think think the middle section, I think what is being built, and obviously N has been looked at, I think the middle section is probably your biggest problem. I don't know
We do agree with that.
how much discussion and how much thought was put into that. I haven't went back and looked. I'm just telling you what I see now. And I agree, progress is gonna come. I think y'all need to decide how committed you are to whichever way. I agree with pretty much everything that everybody said in here tonight, but we have a major issue in between that is gonna take manpower and obviously, some money to fix and time. So as long as everybody's eyes wide open, I do what I get paid for. That's to make it work. We'll make it work, whatever y'all decide.
I have a question. A lot of this was not here, Tommy, when you were here. Chad, you may know so both of these guys developed it, Spring Creek and River Forest. They both go to one lift station, correct?
Yes, sir. They go to one lift station on April Pike, which I'm sure, I don't even know, and Tommy, I believe you can, that pump wasn't being utilized until.
River Forest goes to Sunnyside.
River Forest is a separate
Yes.
lift.
So River
Right.
Forest does actually go to Morningside?
Yes.
Sunnyside.
Sunnyside.
Goes to Sunnybrook or whatever it's
So it goes
subdivision.
to Morning,
So that lift station has grinder pumps in it already.
the one at Morningside is getting.
But the one in Morningside's getting all of it.
Yeah, it ends up at Morningside, so
Including the lift station on Eagle Pike.
that's correct. Everything ends up at Morningside, including
And some
Sunnyside.
of the problems aren't necessarily at the lift stations. It has a lot to do with the way your system connects together. You've got these force mains that are tying together, and these pumps are pumping against one another, and it's causing,
The back pressure.
and surcharging and other.
And so two questions I have, and Chad, Cindy, Tommy, y'all may know, y'all possibly may know because your engineers have designed this stuff. From the lift station at Eagle Pike, it pumps to the lift station at Morningside Drive, and then Morningside Drive pumps across Challenge to the sewer plant.
That's correct.
Is everything that's getting pumped into an 8-inch or larger line, or do we have any bottlenecks that are sitting?
It is not. The Morningside to Challenge is actually a 6 that
It's a
I
6.
think has been discussed about being upgraded. That's why we have problems with that lift station. That's definitely something that would have to
But
be.
it's manifolded into another force main in the check.
It is.
So
It is.
that by itself may cause maybe a big part of the problem.
That I do agree with. So, if we looked at maybe upgrading the lines from Morningside
To where?
Yeah,
it would have to be to the sewer.
Morningside to the 8-inch, and then what they done at the sewer plant was they took an 8-inch force main and teed it into a 6-inch force main, existing force main, into the sewer plant already.
Is that the one that came from elementary school back?
The 6-inch force main that runs
So
along
it's
the
not the
highway.
new one running back
No,
there?
that's the 8-inch force main.
But it goes all the way to the plant?
It goes all the way to the plant and tees back into a 6-inch force main
Yes,
before
sir.
it goes into the
So-
diverter box.
Everything in town goes into that 6-inch sewer plant?
Yes, sir, I verified that that is a 6-inch main. in
Right
there.
now, it doesn't very well.
So I guess two concerns I have sitting on the planning commission board.
Absolutely.
If there's unknowns between, everything y'all built is gonna handle your subdivision great, because an engineer designed it, it's going to the lift station. Two concerns I have is, like, Tommy's brought up, the likelihood that our pumps designed for gray water may get too much stuff that's not supposed to go in the sewer line at one time and get hung up. And two, the town's gonna, over time, incur some hefty expense fixing stuff that is a direct impact on the number of homes that we're putting on the system. I don't know what to do with that, because I mean, preliminary plats are already through, and now we're at the final stage. But if we need to upgrade infrastructure, we need to upgrade infrastructure. I think moving forward, we're gonna have to ask developers to co-op in the cost of any new subdivision is making an impact on the old system. And Tommy knows as well as I do, the stuff put in the late 80s and early 90s can't handle much. You know, most of that was, new subdivisions coming in, they're going to have to be a case-by-case scenario, because there's some old parts of town with 2-inch lines and 4-inch lines, they're going to have to stay gray water, regardless of the new plan, unless new infrastructure is brought from those developments all the way out. Specifically y'all's, that's my main concerns, is the vehicle, the pipeline that gets from the lift stations to the sewer plant. There's going to be some major failures. I know specifically the sewer plant, or the lift station at Eagle Pike, Lampley's subdivision, Stammer Farms, was maybe 140 houses, 145.
90 lots originally.
Was it 90?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so 90 lots. Now, I'm sure the lift station was over-designed a little bit.
Not by much. Our engineer's the one that designed that
Okay.
originally. And,
So we have two issues. We have a lift station designed for maybe 100 houses, and we're putting 250 on it, and it don't have the right kind of pump.
Did we not know that one?
Well, and forgive me, but I'm not sure that's exactly how Alton characterized it. He didn't, it sounds like there's some infrastructure issues, there's no question, right? But I don't think adding the solid waste
I think adding solid waste
makes
and-
that more of a problem.
And the solid waste and more rooftops than was originally
Well,
anticipated.
that's two different things. We're talking about tanks versus no tanks, right? So the solid waste doesn't sound to me like that's contributing to the problem. At least that's not anything.
According to Tommy, it does, and Tommy's the one that's cleaning them out. And I agree that the pump in there is gonna chew up most anything you put in there. If all of the infrastructure in your neighborhood flows fine, there's no dips or bottlenecks, and it wasn't when it was originally put in, because all that gets inspected. But if there's, a group of households that everybody's putting stuff down the toilet that don't need to be, we do small grounded pumps in basements, and 9 out of 10 households, they work just fine. 1 out of 10, you're over there every 3 months cleaning crap out of a grinder pump, a true grinder pump, and it's stuff that shouldn't be going down the toilet. But how do you police that? You can't. You can't. And then.
It's like asking everybody in town to put grease traps underneath their sink.
Yeah, you're not.
And not put.
We could require it
garbage
on a restaurant.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to require that, but on a residence, we can't. So
Sure, I guess I was talking about the flow rate, the capacity of your infrastructure. That's not going to change whether there's a tank in the ground or not. And
no, it's not, but the infrastructure in place, and I'm not an engineer, but
Well, there's two primary issues. One is the systems that are here now weren't designed to accommodate doubling the number of homes that are going into it. But the other element that every other.
I heard that, but that didn't have anything to do with the tanks.
No, nothing to do with the tanks. You're not increasing or decreasing the flow, whether you put tanks in or don't
Sure.
put tanks in. It's going to be the
Capacity, number of
same.
rooftops.
Correct. The other issue that the town has is inflow and infiltration, rainwater and groundwater into their system. That you're getting 2 additional flows. More flow because of new development
Right.
that maybe some of these pump stations and force mains weren't really designed to accommodate. But then the maintenance, the long-term maintenance of this system, and to my knowledge, again, I haven't been working here that long, but you can go out to the system and kind of see. I don't think there's been any rehab work done or much rehab work done here in years and years and years, and you can't do that. If you don't maintain a car, I always use this example. If you spend $50,000 a year on this system to maintain it, in 10 years you spend $500,000, but you got a system that's in pretty good shape. If you wait 10 years and don't do anything, you'll spend $2 million rehab. So what's smarter? So, there's not a single person in this room who's at fault for this. It's what you inherited, it's what you got, it's what you do from here going forward that determines the legacy that y'all are kind of trying to create here, and whether or not you can accommodate continued growth and development.
Sure.
And my stance after speaking with several people in this room, and Gary Horn with TDEC and Wade Murphy with TDEC, if the new plant's gonna be built, we've gotta get your solids down there. There's no question in my mind about that. if the board and the town can financially swing it, I think that no tanks is potentially the right call if the new sewer plant gets built, and if the town's committed.
But that's the
to make
tank
sure
issue,
that happens.
and then the capacity issue needs to be addressed, or there's no more new growth, right?
That's,
I mean,
that's great. Now, no more new growth where you're at. On the other side of town, a developer is talking about running a 10-inch line all the way to the sewer plant.
Well, we may not allow him to do that.
Okay, well,
There's,
it's just
there's,
talk, but
you know, that sounds really good. I'm gonna run a 10-inch line, but believe me, that can cause more problems than it fixes. Because if you can't maintain velocity in that line of at least 3.5 feet per second, which they won't be able to, all the solids and everything else that they're pumping into that line will eventually settle out somewhere in that line, and you'll have problems.
by oversizing.
Correct.
Essential people.
Same scenario. So, again, that's why I'm working with them. I'm waiting on Gerald Big to submit me his stuff and do the hydraulic calculations, which I don't have yet. But as soon as they do, we'll look at that and come to a conclusion about what size that needs to be.
But they're most likely gonna run a pipe.
Yes,
They're not gonna come to this side of town.
They're gonna run new infrastructure.
New
They are.
infrastructure.
However,
Which is-
the route that we want them to take, I want to set the route up a certain way so that that thing may not always run all the way to the wastewater treatment plant. We may put an intermediate pump station in there along Cheney that would collect sewer from that entire basin, gravity sewer from that entire basin there. So, but the other thing too is if you put wastewater in a force main for a very long period of time, it becomes septic. You know, so you need it to empty out.
Yeah.
And having that long to run there's some potential issues with that. So we're taking that into consideration too and working with the developer on that.
When's our next meeting's next Monday, right?
It's coming.
The
Monday
original
morning.
meeting, and they're gonna be there with their plaque for
Yep.
2B.
Yep,
Is that correct?
yep.
2B should be there.
Phase 2, section 2. I think. Or section.
Yeah.
This here is just a training. This is a section for that plaque. And what we're gonna do as far as tanks, no tanks, or upgrading our system before we allow that 2B to be formed.
So it's 28.
28.
So it's 2 weeks, 2 weeks.
From yesterday.
2 weeks.
Okay.
So
It's kind
right-
of, I mean, from what I'm looking at, it's a catch-22, because for the new system, everybody I've talked to at TDEC, for the new system to work, we have to take their solids. We don't have to take everybody's solids, though, because there's certain areas of town where you got 4-inch infrastructure. And I've talked to Mr. He told about this, it's just simply not gonna work. In some areas, what they're doing is, I do, after talking to Chad, and listening to Tommy, Alden, Cindy, I would be in favor of having a discussion about upgrading
Pump station.
the pumps in the lift stations, big grinder pumps, maybe accommodate a higher flow than what they're originally, or what they put in for now.
And if the city elects to put the safety net in there about changing the impellers out to the grinder type impellers, that would be the time to do that too.
What would that expense be, $10,000-$15,000, or do you, just off the top of your head?
Depends on the size of the station. I mean, you got several lift stations here in town that are various sizes, and like Morningside wouldn't be the same as the other
Yeah.
smaller ones that are in town. The other thing too that that's part of this study that we talked about last time would be evaluating. We need to do away with those manifold enforce mains, and what's the best and most cost-effective resolution to that problem? Because believe me, that may be as big a problem as anything else that you've got in the system right now.
If you do away with that, yeah. 'Cause I rode through town after we met over there the week before last. There's more manholes in there, one subdivision than.
We got all of
than-
Chapel Hill.
Than all of Chapel Hill.
Mhm.
If we don't have the force main, that's gonna cost more than our sewer plant.
No,
Redoing all
no,
that.
not necessarily. I mean, granted, there will be phases of improvements. And what hopefully this study would do would be identify what needs to happen in order, in order of priority. There may be 15 different capital improvement projects that you want to do over the next 10 years. But what you want to do is attack them, one, in order of priority, or if you have a development that occurs that would directly impact something in that area, then ask the developer to participate in the cost for those improvements.
Todd, this is a question for you, is not having all this knowledge when we approve a preliminary plat, it is certainly an option for the planning commission to have a discussion with someone about an improvement outside of their development, but if their development's putting an impact on it.
Talking about for future developments.
Well, no, the final plat approval Tommy's got coming up.
To be.
Is it fair to have a discussion with Tommy with an aiding cost of setting some money aside for the grinder pumps?
Fair or unfair, it's not legal. You can't require them to do it. If you've already done a preliminary
You don't
plat
have a
approval.
system improvements contract that you, like, for example, I told y'all last time what we did over in Murray County right next door, where they're having a similar amount of development. And what we have now is for them, they're just a water system. A water system improvement contract, where any time a development comes in that will impact a portion of their infrastructure, they pay a pro rata share of the cost for the upgrade of that infrastructure.
Yeah, and without that, the short end is, as soon as you approve a preliminary plat, you're basically saying our infrastructure is going to support it.
Have we already done 2B?
Yeah, we've done the preliminary.
Yeah.
Preliminary.
So
Now that's a little bit different
Yeah.
because our current, and again, I'm not advocating for this necessarily because I don't, but our current regs do require the small septic tanks to be installed. I don't think there's any dispute. The former town administrator waived that requirement, and then the construction plans were approved without these for all these future developments. That's different than having a vested right because our regs do say they're required to do it. So they don't have a vested right in the waiver of that requirement for future phases, because we haven't approved the construction plans for that next phase yet. But again, the bigger picture, the reason why the change was done and the tank requirement was removed was because the town has approved the design.
I do know it didn't come across the planning commission board.
Let me be clear, that 2B is, we're talking about getting the final plat. So the construction drawings, construction plans.
Have they been approved for that one, for 2B?
Yes.
Okay.
2B's almost built.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, so it's phase 3 then.
Well, that's the final phase of Spring Creek Farms.
Okay. So
To
if
be-
short
Phase 2,
answer
section
is,
2,
if
yes.
construction plans have been approved by the town,
Correct.
they can
Have we
build,
approved it?
that's approved.
It's all done internally.
Well, it was done last year.
With the state,
Yeah.
so,
Before we ever started construction.
So I think,
I'm Danny Clausen, we've talked, good to meet you, Mayor. I'm a builder, I'm a middleman here, okay, big developer, but I'm a developer as well. And something, Mayor, you said a while ago, and something that Todd just touched on. I don't know how you could hold these guys accountable in River Forest or any remaining sections of Spring Creek Farm run up with their buildings. It's a bait and switch rule at this point. You've already allowed them to have it, and then right before they're done, or before I get a C of O, you stop it and you try to hold it. Guys, that's not legal to do that. You can't do that, right? I mean,
Again, if the construction plans have been approved,
they have been approved.
building permits
Construction's
issued,
there.
then
Money's being spent. You've already approved it. It's hard to pull back from that now. As the developer, on any future, we would love to continue to build, even us develop here. At that time, if there's infrastructure that needs to be done before it gets approved, we as developers are willing to do that if it's a reasonable request, just like what Alton said.
Does this board not have to sign off on the no tanks? From the Obama board?
it's not, so the regulations are in the ordinance, in the wastewater ordinance, which goes back, I don't know, 20 years probably.
Yeah.
And there's one line that requires that tank to be installed. but there's also another line that basically allows the superintendent or the administrator to make a variance upon the request for those requirements, and that's what seems to have happened. Again, thinking that we were going to move forward with the construction of this new plant.
Let me reiterate what Danny just said. If Alton presented to you guys a list of 15 priorities or items, that capital improvement projects, and you knew an estimated cost for those, and then I come to you and I say, hey guys, I've got a new development that I want to do, and then you prorate the cost of my impact onto that infrastructure.
So we missed the boat.
That's
what we should have done.
I mean, but that's a
You
discussion,
did.
right?
Well, no, we didn't. I mean, really, we didn't.
Theoretically, we
But
haven't.
you waived it, that's the thing.
Well, no, we didn't.
We did.
This board didn't.
That's my problem.
I understand, but the city did.
No.
Yes, and no.
So for all these, I mean, there was an additional fee that was levied for these developments. They've all paid.
They did.
What may
For the
not
sewer
have
plant.
done, you know, the town may not have gone through and looked at the existing infrastructure and accounted for the cost to improve that part of it and added that to the amount. But even today, we don't have a good idea of what that figure would be, I don't think.
Well, we still got like I said, we've got our regular meeting in 2 weeks, it's gonna be brought up for us. And just, no disregard for you, I don't wanna be the man, I don't wanna be that guy, but theoretically, right now, it don't have nothing to do with y'all, in my opinion, right now. The town's gonna decide what they're gonna wanna do, whether it's right or wrong, and then suffer the consequences, or go with you. I know we're not gonna do nothing about phase 1 and phase 2 and 2B, maybe we can or cannot. I don't know that. All I'm saying is we gotta come up with a solution, whether we wanna do this or not do this, or what we're gonna do. And it needs to come to this board and then the Obama board. And I don't see no reason to hold it up no further. But regardless, it's gonna come from here, not from y'all or nobody else sitting here telling us what we can and cannot do. It's gonna come this board and our Obama board. And I'm gonna make that plain and straight right now,
Okay, Mayor,
going forward.
Mayor, you're a smart man. You hired a smart man. You hired
And that's
a
what we're
smart
gonna
man.
discuss.
And I would like, just to encourage you, to listen to who you hire, because otherwise you're gonna put you and your city into a real situation. And I don't want that for you, I don't want that for the city. We've enjoyed working here, but.
And I'm not saying that's gonna happen. I'm just saying, let's just.
But right now, the words you're saying, you're leading to that, and I just don't want you to do that, because I think I think it's whole city's a lot smarter than that. We
And
can
I
all
think we
work
are.
together, and you've hired two very highly looked at professionals here that I think are offering some good advice to you.
And we will take that into consideration, no question. That's what I've done so far, not planning on changing.
We're moving on toward regular, special call meeting for the summer,
So
so we'll wrap this up.
what do we, can we make a recommendation to pass on to the Bowman that specific to the two subdivisions that have been approved by the state plans and approved by the entire city administrator without tanks? I think we need to pass that along to the Bowman, that specific to what these guys are working on, we do not need to require tanks. Now moving forward, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think moving forward, we need to look at every single project on a case-by-case scenario based on the infrastructure that we're tying into, lift station is going to, pumps in the lift stations. You know, it may not be one size fits all. You know, one development on, you know, a 10-lot development up on top of the hill on Broadview Street may be a gravity with tanks, gray water system, because it's tied into a 4-inch line that runs along Broadview. So I don't think we can make one rule and enforce it throughout the whole town, because there's a lot of the old infrastructure built in the late 80s and early 90s that will
You
not
can't-
accommodate
you
problems
just can't do it.
without
I
major.
agree with that. It's like what Tommy said, we're gonna have to do it on a case-by-case basis and do a laundry list of what we have in that situation in that part of town and make a decision based on that. And then if they want to build or develop in this area, at that time on the front end, we ask for participation. And then they say if they want to play, they have to pay or not. I mean, that's the short.
Are you making a motion?
Yes,
I'll
yes.
second that motion.
Yep.
I'll
That's a
second the
motion
motion.
right now.
I'll
So we
second
have
the
a
motion.
motion that was made. Have you got that down? to pass to the Bowman to not require tanks on what has already been built, and going forward will be a case-by-case situation.
That's fine.
It's specifically on plans that are, the construction plans are approved.
Todd?
Yeah, and so, without interrupting that, Alton is working on updated specs that, I'm not sure if they're in the form of exactly how it's gonna be presented, but in order to do away with what we currently have in place, the BOMA will have to pass new ordinances to change those specs, and that should be before the BOMA in the next month or two, probably.
And water too, are we just gonna piggyback?
It's water and sewer.
Water and sewer.
These standard specs for water and sewer.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
They was together.
Yes.
So I have a motion and a second for a recommendation to send to the BOMA. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition, motion carries. Any other business? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Have a motion to adjourn, do I have a second? All in favor, rise.
Thank you, gentlemen.
What are you working on next time? What are you working on next?
You were like a regular. No, you're gonna see a face with a voice.
Oh, what's the name? I knew the voice.
It's on the back.